Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show on a really dark day for the country. We're taking your calls at 855-236-3228. That's 855-236-3228. Gabriella in Virginia, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Gabriella.
Yes. Hi, Ben. I am asking, as a Hispanic, I've had a big problem with the term person of color, and with close family and friends asking me why I'm not agreeing with them fully, I guess, on their stance. What is your answer when someone says that people are acting this way because of being enslaved, years and years ago?
Not a single rioter has lived under slavery. Not a single one. Neither have their parents, neither have their grandparents, neither have their great-grandparents, unless their great-grandparents were super duper old. So it is an astonishing thing to claim that you are robbing a Foot Locker because of slavery. Like that it does not work that way. Now, if you want to say that there is poverty that is the historical lingering effect of slavery or Jim Crow, you can make that argument in terms of wealth. I think that it's an argument that has been wildly overstated, that the vast majority of day-to-day poverty is still dependent on individual decision-making in the United States, particularly 60 years after the Civil Rights era. But if you are claiming that people are rioting and looting because they're angry about slavery, then you're going to have to explain why other groups that have been oppressed in the United States and abroad don't routinely go and riot and loot. And the answer is because this has nothing to do with slavery. In fact, it doesn't even have anything to do with police brutality. This has to do with a bunch of people who are taking advantage of a really hot situation in order to go get a TV. And that's disgusting. And it's evil. And anybody who suggests that it's justified because America is deeply racist and endemically racist, see, this is the biggest problem that I have with the media and our politicians and our political class, is that at the same time, they are saying President Trump, he's so inflammatory, so terrible. They've spent decades indoctrinating people into the belief that America is deeply, endemically, unchangeably racist and that its people are racists as well. And so if you grew up believing that, if you grew up believing that America was racist and that all of its institutions are racist, then you'd be striking a blow for liberty by going and robbing the Foot Locker, perhaps. Or at least you could theoretically make that case. And you see this from people like Spike Lee. You've seen this from Don Lemon. You've seen this from Charles Blow. The idea is that rioters and looters are somehow justified because, after all, they are fighting the quote-unquote system, and the system is racist in general. It's a vile argument. It's historically untrue. I mean, the fact is that the United States has changed, if people haven't noticed, just a little bit since 1964. And it's changed an awful lot since 1865. And this notion that rioting and looting are justified by anger against police officers, I'm wondering who exactly is defending police brutality at this point. I'm really not seeing a lot of defenses of police brutality. And beyond that, I still have yet to see the non-feelings-based, anecdotal-based evidence that police officers all over the country are unduly targeting black people. Like, this idea that racist police officers are dominant across the American landscape is not supported by the evidence. It is not. I mean, the fact is that when people cite instances, they like to say things like stop and frisk. The fact is that stop and frisk targeted blacks and Hispanics at about a rate of 85% of all stops and frisks in New York City were black and Hispanic. And over 90% of all street crime in New York City, as reported by victims of street crime, was black and Hispanic. Does that mean that the police officers are racist? Does that mean that there is something wrong with the police officers, or are the police officers responding to crime? I mean, this generalized notion that police officers are willy-nilly going out and shooting unarmed black men, it's not true. Statistically speaking, it is not true. In fact, if you are a white person who is in a confrontation with police, in some sort of armed confrontation with police, you're more likely to be shot by the police than if you are black, according to statistics put together by Roland Fryer. The situations in which unarmed people are being shot, very often those situations are under conflict because somebody is attacking an officer with a gun. Is that person unarmed or is that person not unarmed? Like Michael Brown was shot while he was unarmed. That was after he tried to take a gun off a police officer and fired a couple of shots into his car and then attempted to charge him. That's not being shot while unarmed. That's not shot unjustifiably. Okay, so the attempt to castigate all police officers across the country as racist, or more broadly, all Americans as racist, and then justify rioting and looting, I will say the soft bigotry of low expectations here is absolutely incredible. It really is. The notion that you can't control yourself enough to not rob a Target. Your anger at America made you break into that ATM at the Target is just insane. Everyone else is expected to behave decently, except for rioters and looters, as long as the issue happens to be a racial issue, according to the media. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
You bet. If you've noticed that I have some passion on this issue, it's because I really believe that the downfall of the country comes in this. The downfall of the country comes down to, do you believe that America is irremediably racist? That America is evil and terrible all the way through? Do you think that America is garbage and therefore deserving of being torn down, and that most Americans are garbage and therefore deserving of whatever happens to them. If you believe that, then America has no future. There cannot be a vote. There cannot be a Republican conversation. There cannot be any sort of democratic procedure. None of that is going to alleviate the fundamental evil of America. And that's what a lot of people on the left are pushing for, and it's disgusting. Truly disgusting. All righty. Jake in Florida, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Jake.
Hey, Ben. My question was something you said earlier today was about the liability threshold, the immunity for state governments, which I think in Florida is low. I think it's $200,000, which, as far as liability goes, that's pretty low. I was wondering, that seems like an issue that we can come together on the left with to change. And I was wondering what you think some other issues are that we can kind of come together with, and if maybe you were had the idea to do maybe like a Daily Wire policy section where you can advocate these policies over political divide.
You know, it's a news website, and so we tend not to put out actual policy statements because we're not a political campaign. But I think there are some issues where theoretically, if the left were honest, they could agree. So, for example, there's the question of a doctrine called qualified immunity. It shields police and government officials from accountability for illegal and unconstitutional acts. The Supreme Court created it in 1982, and it's largely unlimited. I mean, it creates this broad immunity that is too broadly applied, I would say. Limiting qualified immunity would make a lot of sense because, again, if you act outside the scope of authority, I'm not sure exactly why you should be granted immunity. Number one, I think that juries take into account the fact that police officers have hard jobs. But I think the idea that police departments can't be sued if something goes wrong, or the idea that if you are a police officer and you do something deeply egregiously wrong, that the union has to protect you or something, like that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. I think there are areas where we can come together on some of this stuff, but we can't come together so long as your fundamental starting point is that this isn't an issue of police procedure, it's an issue of American racism. If you believe it's an issue of police procedure, then we can change the procedures in order to deal with the failure to handle the procedures, right? We've done that in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, there was baton training after Rodney King. There were all sorts of procedures that were put in place to limit the ability of police to do things without supervision after the Rampart scandal here in LA. You've seen this across the country. But if you don't actually believe that this is a procedural problem or even a problem of staffing, if you believe that no matter who you staff in the police, because they're an institute of law enforcement and law enforcement in America is historically racist, and therefore you can never have a non-racist law enforcement in the United States unless presumably it is staffed by Black Americans. And then even if it is staffed by Black Americans, it's still racist because it's internalized racism, which is what you see from a lot of people. Well, then there's no solution in the offing. And this is where, I'm asking for honest solutions from the left. Honest solutions from the left would be good. But I'm not seeing a lot of honest solutions from the left. You know why? Because it turns out that the vast majority of these instances that we are seeing are in Democrat-controlled cities, okay, where they've been running the PD. LA has been run by Democrats nearly my entire lifetime. New York has been run by Democrats for the last, decade and a half since Rudy Giuliani left office and Michael Bloomberg switched parties. Major city, Chicago has never been run by a Republican. Minneapolis hasn't been run by a Republican for 50 years. So is this really about policy? Or is this really about a deeper argument, which is that America's law enforcement bodies are suspect and are racist, and any aspect of police brutality is not a procedural problem, it's a racial problem? This is the big problem. You can't agree with people who have fundamentally different starting points. Charles in Minneapolis, Minnesota, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Charles.
Oh, hello. Hey, I just want to say you're a great person, and I like it. I like watching you, and this is the reason why I'm coming out to ask you this question. So I'm here at the epicenter of the protests and the riots that are going on. I've never participated in any protests before, and I had other opportunities to protest, but I just never did. I never saw the point. Yesterday, I live 2 blocks from the U.S. Bank Stadium. We had like over 5K people protest. My fiance and I joined that. Very peaceful. Everybody was helping each other out, giving out waters. There was children there. And I know, why would people bring children to a protest? But the fact of the matter is they did. But now there's been confirmed cases that there are Antifa people who are infiltrating these protests. And they found accelerants around the neighborhoods of Minneapolis. Yep. My goal is, and that's why I'm asking you, I am for the people. I don't want nobody's life to be in danger. I'm not looking for permission. I just want to see what your thought is of me going around just to keep making sure I'm, getting a group together to kind of secure everybody that's doing this protest peacefully. And so that's my question.
I mean, so a couple of things. One, I think that protesting is First Amendment protected activity. And if you feel the necessity to protest, go and do it. I would suggest that one of the things that you do and what would be really useful is some of these tapes that we're seeing of people actually going and talking to the police officers. They go up to police officers, and instead of, what we've seen at some of these protests, yelling and chanting and all this at the police officers, recognize that the police officers are generally on your side. And I think that would be a very good thing. Extending the conversation with the police is what's going to actually help us come out of this sort of thing. So I think that's useful. I guess one of my questions is, when it comes to protesting, what are you protesting for? What do you think is what outcome are you looking for here, other than just expressing that we all think police brutality is bad, which we do. And I don't think that we need to actually go out in the streets to express that it's a bad thing to kneel on a guy's neck for 9 minutes while he says he can't breathe. It seems like that's fairly obvious to everybody. So what political changes would you be looking for?
My political changes is just the way that we implement the police force and their just responsive time, and just the way that, they approach the situation, instead of just, if things start to get out of hand, if a police officer is, about to lose their cool, confining their partner, because they always have a partner with them, or they call for backup. Just, that's what I'm looking for. The more reason why I went out to go walk in that protest yesterday is because a person died from this that could have been easily avoided. I've been a security officer before for 10 years, and the number one rule I knew not to do was to put my knee on somebody's neck or their airways. And that's what I want.
Well, I mean, again, I think that any call for changing procedures, or for the other 3 cops who stood around and did nothing here to face charges for complicity in that, I'm again agreeing with that. So, if you want to protest again, I think that you should. I think that you should go and you should talk with the police officers. I think that, you should obviously not, I think, agree with the people who are claiming that America is, broadly speaking, racist and terrible, because I don't think that's true, or that the police are out to get Black Americans. I don't think that's true either. But I think that distinguishing yourself and going up to the media and distinguishing yourself and saying, listen, those of us here who are protesting have nothing to do with these rioters and looters. I think that's a very good thing that you're doing, actually.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback.
Well, I appreciate it, Charles. Thanks so much for listening to the show. We're going to take more of your calls momentarily at 855-236-3228. That's 855-236-3228.